Monday Night Rugby on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, main sponsor of the Irish rugby team. We all belong to the team of us.
Plenty to discuss from the weekend that was. Joined in studio by Cian Tracey of the Irish Independent. Great to have you in. Thanks for popping in.
Thank you for having me, Joe.
We were just saying there during the news, you're going to Toulouse for Ireland, France in round 2 of the Women's Six Nations. These are the things you will do for your craft. I applaud you. It's commendable.
Yes, I'm looking forward to it. There's definitely worse places to be in France than Toulouse for a weekend. Hopefully the weather holds up now. So yeah, looking forward to it. So it was an encouraging start, but a very different test is awaiting this weekend, and I think kind of everyone realises that, really.
They sure do. We were just saying as well, best of luck at Dublin Airport.
I know.
Give it 5 hours and you might get through.
I know, over the last couple of days it's gone up to like 3 hours before. Now it's up to 3.5, so I'm kind of worried by Friday it could be like 5 hours before. So I'm flying early on Friday, so hopefully I miss most of the madness, but I'm conscious that it is a Friday as well. So yeah, not great, but hopefully we'll get there anyway.
Let's start with the Women's Six Nations and then we'll talk a little URC. Ireland 19, Wales 27. The French on Sunday in Grenoble beat Italy, and England ran in 9 tries in Edinburgh against Scotland. England very much the defending champions, and they will play France in round 5. So from a championship perspective, England and France are very much the haves as opposed to the have-nots in this tournament, and the tournament is building to their round 5 clash. But let's talk Ireland then against Wales. For starters, at the RDS, just worth saying, record crowd, 6,113 through the gates, beautiful sunshine. Again, context is everything here. There was a time not so long ago when these games were at Ashburn and these games were getting hundreds and certainly not 6,000 plus.
Yeah, it was a great occasion. I mean, I at the start I was kind of thinking, God, it doesn't look like there's many here, but I think they kind of streamed in towards the end. And one of the, I don't know if you'd say, issues about moving it to RDS is obviously it's much bigger than Donnybrook where the games had been on. So I was just worried from, I hear so many people having this discussion about League of Ireland grounds. I was just wondering how it was going to look on TV when both of the stands behind the goals were closed off and empty. It didn't kind of give a true reflection of, I think, that the size of the crowd that was there. So covering the women's games it's a very, very different crowd, and I think the last time I was in here we were chatting about the atmosphere at the Aviva Stadium and stuff. What I love about it is that the age demographic is so young. There's so many young girls, but also young boys as well, and it's infectious. There's a real good buzz there, and I think, you know, people are willing to get behind this team. I mean, from my point of view, I'm certainly kind of fed up of the negativity around women's rugby as well. And okay, they didn't get the win, but there was plenty of encouraging signs, I thought.
So Ireland 19, Wales 27. On the face of it, if you go from beating this Welsh team 45-0 in Cardiff to losing at home and not even coming away with a losing bonus point, this is very bad. So explain to us why, on the face of it, when there shouldn't be much optimism, there is some.
Yeah, I've seen this kind of being used as kind of almost a stick to beat this women's team with. There's a couple of different strands to it, Joe. Like, I mean, the first thing and the obvious thing to state is that since that game, the WRU, the Welsh Union, have handed out 12 professional contracts to their team now. I thought it was certainly noticeable in the conditioning of the players, of the Welsh players. Their fitness towards the end really told. They've also handed out something like 12 retainer contracts as well. So, just to give a bit of context, Ireland had 3 training camps before they went in. So Wales have been full-time preparing for this. So you can't overlook that. Like, it's not a level playing field. Like, all these girls who are playing for Ireland are either juggling jobs or else they're juggling college work. So not easy at all. Secondly, it's a very different Ireland team to the team who's put 45 points in them last year. Like, you're talking about savage experience lost from that team, like Claire Molloy, Ciara Griffin, Lindsay Peat. There's several players. So I think Emer Considine was the most experienced player on Saturday, and she had 23 caps. So that puts it all into context. I was kind of doing up for the paper on Saturday the total caps within each squad, and Wales had over 3 times the number of caps that Wales had. So again, you can't overlook all these aspects of it. Like, the base is pretty low where Ireland are starting from, and if anyone who's expecting overnight miracles is foolish, really.
Yeah, I think the context here, all those points you make, absolutely valid. And on the caps point, of the match day 23 for Ireland, 17 players had 10 caps or fewer. of the 23. So in effect, what's happening here under a new coach in Greg McWilliams is that because Ireland have no World Cup to worry about at the end of this year, they are starting their post-World Cup rebuilding cycle now. Whereas all the other teams are building up to the World Cup. That's why Wales have all that experience. And so that is an important context to remember here. The other thing, I mean, if we're to talk about the game itself, just looking at the two sides pre-game, it's very clear Greg McWilliams has set out his stall as the new coach. I'm going to play this very mobile brand of rugby. We're going to have the ball and play a lot. It's going to be intense. We're going to be very, very fit. Now, again, your point about other teams being professional and Ireland somehow going to be fitter than them is an issue potentially, but then again, other teams are bigger, and that's the issue for Ireland. The Welsh front row alone was 54 kgs combined heavier than the Irish front row, not to mention the rest of the pack. And we noted that pre-game and we said, okay, well, let's see how this plays out. And initially it wasn't so bad, but certainly across the second half, Wales just mauled Ireland off the park and all that power came into effect. There was a try held up on 53 minutes with a maul, and then Donna Rose, replacement prop, scored 2 tries, rolling mauls. It seemed like Ireland were just powerless to do much about it.
They were, but I don't think they helped themselves either. So the first try that Wales scored, like, it came from a 5 metre line out that I was so surprised that Ireland competed at that line out, because in so many situations like that you'll see that unless you are really confident that you're going to steal the ball, you stay in the ground because it allows you to set the maul. I thought that was a bit of naivety, to be honest. Their penalty count was through the roof. Was it 14 or 16 penalties? 16. Like a load of knock-ons. So they were giving Wales chances, I felt, to get back into the game, if you know what I mean. And it's funny, like, I mean, you talk about the style of play and also the issues at hand, and you're spot on. It's the power game. It's so similar to the conversations we have ad nauseum about the men's team. So I was kind of thinking about this afterwards. I didn't think the scoreline, I know Wales' power game showed in the end, but I don't know, was it just being there, but it felt like a closer game to me, like, because Wales did run in 3 late tries. Ireland were down to 14 players, which, okay, it was for persistent, giving away penalties, but I thought it was a bit harsh as well on Emer Considine. So, they did score 2 tries in the last 10 minutes when Ireland were down to 14 players as well. So it's important to kind of keep that in mind. So, yeah. And also Ireland led for the whole game until the hour mark. So, there was this sense of things were going along okay for a huge amount of that game. They scored some lovely tries as well. Like the point of 31% possession. Yeah. That's the only, I mean, Ireland couldn't keep the ball either, was a slight worry. Anytime they seem to get into the Welsh 22, they seem to score a pretty good try. Like the Sam Monaghan offload for the Linda Jungang try was exceptional. And you kind of, that was in the first half, and it was lots of unstructured play and all the kind of things. There's kind of a parallel with what the men are doing at the moment, all that kind of stuff. And it finishes with second row throwing an outrageous offload to a prop who's running this fantastic line, beats her player in front of her and touches down. You think, okay, well, if this is the Greg McWilliams party, then sign us up. It's just, they got caught at the death quite badly. And that's going to happen, no more than the men, trying to play this game, that the mistakes are going to be part and parcel of it. Like I said, the base is pretty low, and if you are like kind of using the parallel with the men, it was so long before we saw Mike Catt and Andy Farrell's game plan to come to fruition. So I was really encouraged by the attacking shape that Ireland played. Like I said, they've had 3 camps together. Like, that's next to no time at all. I think last year, when I was like reflecting back on obviously the disappointment of the World Cup qualifying campaign, and probably before that as well, the skill level of the players has been an issue, and that was another reason why I was really encouraged. I thought the skill level was far higher than we've seen in recent seasons. You mentioned Sam Monaghan's offload. I mean, that was sensational. There was other things. There was like Stacey Flood's skip pass for the try for Amy Lee Murphy-Crowe. She made that look really easy. Like, that was kind of Johnny Sexton-esque, really. She did a very good game. Very good, yeah. And she's obviously been playing 10 for the last couple of years, but they've moved Nicole Cronin, who was a scrum half originally, into 10. So that means they're playing with dual playmakers as well, which opens up opportunities exactly like we saw for the try. And even, Nicole Cronin kicking that touchline conversion, like, kicking has been an issue in the women's game as well, but she absolutely bisected the post from the touchline and made it looked easy. So the skill level was much higher, and that is the big thing that Greg McWilliams has focused on since he's come in. He wants a mobile pack. He wants athletic players to be able to play this high tempo game. What is it? He wants the ball and play 20 up at around 36 minutes, which is obviously ambitious, but that's what he's aiming for. And yeah, I would assume part of his thinking is that to play that game plan. It's one way to counteract the power teams, but inevitably that is going to catch up with you again. And like we said, France this week, they weren't firing on all cylinders at all against Italy, and you kind of worry that, you know, they were just kind of getting started here. And like I said, England are operating on another level as well. So, like, if we're being honest about it, it's a shootout for third place. And like before the game, I thought Ireland's 3 home games were winnable. I still think the games against Italy and Scotland at home are definitely winnable. And it's just about seeing what you can do in the other 2 games without being sort of overly negative about it.
Yeah, because Nicole Cronin, you mentioned there at 10, is an interesting case in point. 10 has been a problem position for Ireland. A lot of different players tried. Stacey Flood last year and then moved to 12 for this game. So it seems Cronin, she won her 17th cap at the weekend. She's a small player. She mainly has played scrum half, but seems Niamh Briggs has been working with her very closely and specialised training to turn her into a 10, in effect, is how they saw that. And then there was a 21-year-old in Avian Riley making her debut at 9. So that's a completely new composition at 9, 10, and then Stacey Flood moving to 12. Like, if this was the men's game, for instance, all we would be talking about all week is, my God, we've a new 9, we've a new 10, Stacey Flood's moving to 12. How the hell is this going to work first day out? Again, it
It's
didn't
keeping
work
in
perfectly,
perspective,
but
isn't it?
There's a context for all of these. I would say, Nicole Cronin's maybe a touch quieter than Stacey Flood seems to be very prominent, and I guess if you can get Cronin as involved, that might be something they'll look to over the coming weeks.
Exactly, but like there's a reason for that, because Nicole Cronin hasn't been in and around the squad for the last few years. So you can't expect someone to come in and play 10. It's the old debate again that we've been having about like someone like Joey Carberry. If he hasn't been in there, how do you expect him to come in and be this leader? So I think that will come. She was instrumental in Munster winning the Interpro title, and she played 10. So, and you're right, like Niamh Briggs has obviously worked really closely with her. So it'll be interesting to see. You know, there was a lot of sevens players involved at the weekend, which they played really well, but come the latter stages, those players aren't going to be available.
Do you think that's the reason, for instance, Stacey Flood, who will be one of those sevens players departing potentially, that they've said, well, we need certain fundamentals in place here. We need a 9 and we need a 10. So let's put Nicole Cronin in 10, and it means when Stacey Flood departs the scene for sevens, we're not losing her at half.
Yeah, possibly, but like I said, Nicole Cronin also led Munster to the Interborough title, so she's probably there on merit as well. And you know, it was strange, like I know you were at the game as well, but like when Baveen Parsons came on, I mean, initially when she came on, the crowd get to their feet, but my God, like every time she touches the ball, there's a surge of electricity goes through the stadium. As very few players in Irish rugby do that, and I just think like it's a World Cup sevens year, and Greg McWilliams has pointed that out. But I really hope that players like Baveen Parsons aren't going to be held back. Now, I know there was talk that she was just coming back from an injury, her leg was strapped and stuff, but like the IRFU have a serious talent on their hands here, and she's the type of girl who's going to inspire the next generation. I mean, she's only 22 herself, but you can see it afterwards. Like, I mean, the scenes at full time, okay, the fans weren't on the pitch, but it reminded me of David Clifford in the GAA when you see him swamped around for the selfies and stuff. All the people who were at the games, like all they want to see is Baveen Parsons, because for obvious reasons, every time she gets the ball, she's liable to beat defenders. So I just hope that's harnessed in the right way, that because sevens is still a little bit alien to everyone here, you know, because it's played so far away, we don't really get to see it, whereas the Six Nations is the bread and butter, like it's the pinnacle. So hopefully we see her come back in this week, because like I said, she will be one of the players who will likely be away with the sevens later on in the tournament. This
is the dilemma for Irish rugby and the RFU as they're managing this situation. It's a World Cup sevens year, and they've put money and infrastructure into sevens, and yet as a fan base we're about 15s, and I don't see that changing. And it's the Six Nations that realistically, and then the World Cup every 4 years, but it's the Six Nations every year where people will judge how is Irish women's rugby doing. And at the moment, I mean, you can understand why they're taking the best players going to the sevens tournament, but to just leave the Six Nations team high and dry, I think to a lot of fans looking on over these coming weeks will just feel all kinds of wrong. Yeah, and this isn't a new issue at all. Like this has been the case for the last few years, and in a way you kind of think like a new head coach coming in, he's almost got one hand tied behind his back before he even gets started, because the reality is the team who plays against Scotland on the final day is probably going to look very, very different, particularly in the backline, because you'll have players gone. And okay, maybe it's probably changing in the last few years, but like most of these players
grew up, wanting to play in the Six Nations, the sevens wasn't really a thing. Now it's an Olympic sport. There's huge attraction to that, and you see like the men, what they achieved last year by getting to Tokyo, it was incredible. So maybe that is going to start to change with younger people. Oh, it would be the dream to go to the Olympics. But I would safely say most of these players have dreamt of playing, winning Six Nations titles, and like I said, that's what we were all brought up on, really, isn't it? It's not chasing like an Olympic sevens dream, and that's not to diss that either. Like it's a class pathway as well, but I think in the women's game they're clearly still trying to get that balance better, and like I said, the issue is going to raise. It's fine now while the full squad is available, but come the latter part of the Six Nations, it's going to look very different,
and it won't look good. And I don't think over the next 5-10 years, however much emphasis is put on sevens, I still think the majority of fans, for instance, tuning in, will want to see Ireland go well in the Six Nations, in the women's Six Nations, and that is. Yeah,
and they want to see the best players playing
big time. There's a tension there, what the public wants and what the IRFU are doing.
There's like you said, there's funding involved and everything. It's a multi kind of layered issue, if you want to call it like that. But it just, like, you know what, like we had so many discussions throughout the pandemic about World Rugby kind of aligning the men's calendar. Can we get the North and the South better aligned? But to me, it just seems baffling that you have such a big sevens tournament, because this issue isn't just related to Ireland. There's other teams who will be affected by it too, but why I think it's in Langford in Canada where the tournament's on. So why would you have that in the middle of the Six Nations, particularly when you've moved the Six Nations into its own window, which is brilliant, by the way, because I would say a lot more casual viewers tuned in last weekend than would have been the case if it had been in the middle of the men's Six Nations. So rugby just doesn't help itself at times, does it?
Well, even putting it on the same time as Ireland-Belgium,
in like a stone's throw, like even trying to get to the game and everything.
Do a quick Google for any other national sporting events before. I mean, it could have gone at 2, it could have gone at midday. England, Scotland went at midday. So again, those minor frustrations are not insignificant. Last point, looking ahead to Toulouse, as you rightly say, the French weren't perfect by any means against Italy. They had 10 knock-ons, 17 turnovers, just uncharacteristically sloppy. Didn't play well, and yet still scored 5 tries, bonus point, and Italy didn't score a try, and Italy were actually pretty good in that game. So Ireland are really up against it in Toulouse. What's a good day? They lost 56-15, I think, certainly 56 points conceded in Dublin last year against the French.
Yeah, it's a tough one, really, because it's just it's another level altogether. But look, you don't know, you never know. The French could be complacent, those old French cliches, but like you said, they are building towards the World Cup. They're undoubtedly building towards this like shootout with England on the final day. But like there was enough encouraging signs. Like I said, I mean, the maul and the scrum and the set piece, like the line out, is going to have to improve immeasurably, really, going to France to have any sort of hope of keeping the scoreline respectable. But just like in the men's game, like Greg McWilliams can't just magic up new players like that, or bigger, players. These are the crop of players that like he has to choose from. So look, hopefully they can do themselves justice, but this is going to be a serious test for them. Yeah,
it sure will. Our rugby coverage is with thanks to Vodafone, main sponsor of the Irish rugby team. We all belong to the team of us. Cian Tracey here in studio. Let's talk some URC. Connacht 8, Leinster 45. 8,000 at the sports ground. I guess a precursor to their last 16 tie in the Champions Cup. The thing to say here is that at half time it was 8-7 to Connacht, and Leinster ran in 6 tries in the second half. 6 in 24 minutes of rugby, to be exact. 53rd, 57th, 64th, 67th, 72nd, 77th minutes. 6 tries in 24 minutes. So they're top of the table. Connacht, meanwhile, well, they're in 10th. They're in very serious danger of missing out on European rugby altogether next year, and certainly the playoffs. And they lost to Edinburgh in their last game 56 points to 8. So if in 2 successive games you're conceding 56 points and 45 points at home, something's gone awry.
That Edinburgh game was the big one. I mean, obviously you'd have to say Tom Daly's early red card changed the whole complexion of that game. But yeah, like, I mean, there was so much coaching upheaval. Obviously Andy Friend was still there, but over the summer, they got a new defence coach, they got a new attack coach because they basically switched roles. There was a new forwards coach, so there was a lot of change that went on, and I think like they had started okay, but it's kind of come undone now. And like you said, there is clearly issues there. Leinster just went through the gears really in that second half, didn't they? it's interesting, like we've seen red cards are becoming more and more common now, and you've seen teams struggle to break down 14 players, which I find is a really interesting concept. But like I actually did a piece on it a couple of weeks ago and spoke to a few people, and Bundyacky's line particularly stood out to me, that he thinks like unquestionably it's much harder to play against 14 players for all the obvious reasons that, you know, defences tighten up and things like that. So it was impressive the manner in which Leinster put them away. I mean, they just ran riot in the second half, but you would be concerned about Connacht because there is still such a good buzz now. They're recruiting pretty well, I would say, over the summer. There's like 4 Leinster players going down there. They've got a guy from New Zealand coming over as well. So they need that strength and depth because that has been their Achilles heel. But like, you know, you think of the redevelopment of the sports ground that's coming and things like that, you would just be fearful that the air could go out of this pretty soon. So they've left themselves with a mountain to climb now to get into the Champions Cup next season and the playoffs.
They were obviously without Mac Hansen and Bundyaki. Otherwise, in terms of strength, that Connacht side? Yeah,
like they're still like a bit short in the front row, I would say. And Bundyaki is such a talismanic figure for him. I mean, he's, you know, we all know how good he is, but like no less than when any of the provinces are missing their players, you can't be relying on one guy to kind of maintain the standards either. So look, they're going to Italy this weekend, isn't it, against Benetton? They have a chance to get back on track, but like my concern would be that what has that kind of defeat done for them psychologically before they take on Leinster twice?
And the Hansen and Bundyaki side, that's pretty close to them at full strength, isn't it?
Yeah, not too far off. Yeah, like I mean, Tom Daly looking at a potential ban now as well. So like it's, you know, like I said, you wonder what it will do psychologically to them. And then you look at, like I was flicking through the Leinster training photos today, and I don't know, sometimes you forget how many of the Ireland team Leinster actually have, and today was their first day back, and you're just looking through and you're essentially looking at the Irish team in Leinster jersey. So that is the kind of challenge that lies ahead. And like if Leinster turn it on, you'd be worried that it could be over and done with after the first leg, you know. Yeah,
the Leinster team, if people are wondering from the game at the weekend, again, lots of guys we don't see all that often. Jimmy O'Brien, Tommy O'Brien on the wing, Jamie Osborne, Kieran Frawley was at 12, Rory O'Loughlin, Ross Byrne at 10, Luke McGrath was captain, then Peter Dooley, James Tracey, Michael Alatoa in the front row, Ross Maloney and Joe McCarthy second row, and then a back row, Rhys Ruddock, Scott Penny, Max Deegan, all very fine players. Like, it just shows the strength and depth. You mentioned the red card a few times. So this is 3 minutes into the game. Tom Daly comes out, and what's happening, if people haven't seen it here, is Ross Byrne gives it to Kieran Frawley, and there's kind of a loop play in the offing, and Frawley turns to his left and pops the ball off and takes a hit from Tom Daly. He doesn't wrap his arms, and his shoulder goes into to be fair, it was more neck than head area of Frawley, but it was certainly very high, and Frawley didn't go for a HIA, but it wasn't far off being a real shot on the chin. And at that speed and going in that high, I don't think Tom Daly could have guaranteed afterwards that he hadn't hit Frawley on the head. And there was no mitigation, so he was given a red card. And Frawley, by the way, got another knock in the head tackling on 32 minutes and did have a HIA and passed it and came back on and won man of the match. But you think of Charlie Ewells and Ryan, you think of what that so easily could have done to Frawley, and I am at a loss as to why rugby players are still tackling their fellow professionals like this. That could have been at a delicate point in his career, actually, because he's going very well, but trying to push further on. That could have been Frawley taken out of the game, concussed, missing the next number of weeks. James Ryan, we wish him well. We're going to have to start slapping 1, 2, 3 month bans, because the red card deterrent is not a deterrent. This is just, I'm sick of talking about it week in, week out. I don't understand I don't want to make it too much about Tom Daly, but that type of tackle is just commonplace, and it's too dangerous to stay in the game, but it's staying in the game. It looks like it is.
I think I'm right in saying as well, Kieran Frawley was just back after a facial injury as well, so to have gotten 2 knocks like that is obviously not ideal. Look, it was interesting, like you mentioned Charlie Ewells there, and that happened so early in the game as well. So these kind of tackles can happen at any part of the game, but I thought it was interesting that both of them were so early. So I don't know where players just coming out too fired up, and that, like, I don't think there was any intent on Tom Daly's part, absolutely not. But it was definitely the kind of tackle that he wanted to make to lay down a marker. You know, it was against his opposite man in an Interpro derby. You can understand that, but you've got to drop lower. And to be fair, I think he knew straight away that he had made a really bad mistake.
On Ewells and Daly, when we say there's not intent, there's not, but like there is intent to go high.
Yeah, there's not intent to take their head off.
Yeah, but if you're going high, you have to accept there is the distinct chance my shoulder is going to hit someone in the head.
Yeah.
So in that sense, I take the intent point, and I genuinely take it. But like, you're intending to go high, so you're now risking the possibility of my shoulder, his head, high speed. That's where you can only have so much sympathy.
The disciplinary process is a mess, I would say, at the moment. The last time I was in here, I was talking to you about Bismarck du Plessis' like sumo tackle on Alex Kendellen in South Africa, and we were talking in light of Charlie Ewells, and I was saying, well, here's an incident now that like the book just has to be thrown at this guy because it was so dangerous. He got a 3-week ban, which is just baffling to me. Like, he could have easily broken Alex Kendellen's neck. So
Was he well behaved at the hearing?
He was well behaved, yeah, of course he was. Yeah, he brought the nice biscuits and all that. But it's just like, it sends out such a bad message that you can do this to a guy, a fellow professional, and get a 3-week ban for it. So again, it goes back to my point where I don't think rugby really helps itself in that regard, because there's very little consistency in the bans that we're seeing. Like Charlie Ewells got the same, I think, didn't he? And if you were to compare the two incidents, okay, they're both really dangerous, but in my mind, what Bismarck du Plessis did was an actual neck breaker, and he lifted the player off the ground and dropped him on his head. So I just think the whole process is a mess. It's very difficult as well to see any consistency. Like, if you're from a supporter's point of view, you know, like there's just we're touching on Ulster actually really quickly, Joe. Like the end game that they had in South Africa, basically they should have had a try at the end of the game, and Dan McFarlane was seething. Now I know this wasn't necessarily foul play, but I saw the new head of the referees and officials, South African guy, was on South African TV yesterday basically saying that the referee got it wrong. So that is definitely a departure change from what we've seen, because that stuff is all kept under cloak and dagger. So you had the head of the referees saying that Ulster should have had that try. So maybe that's the way you go, that you come out and you have a bit more of an explanation, because I mean, from a journalist point of view, like you're kind of kept in the dark a little bit. And I think from supporters, all you want to see is a bit of consistency that would hopefully deter people from making these kind of tackles. I fully agree with you. I think longer bans are the only way that you're going to change players' behaviour. Yeah,
I don't even love saying that, but it's the same conversation far too often. So it was, last point, it was Callum Reid who they thought had scored the winning try. Ulster lost to the Stormers 23-20. Alan Quinlan was on OTB AM this morning pointing out the TMO South African. So I don't know if we're getting a Razzie Erasmus style video from Dan McFarland very, very soon. He was furious.
Rightfully so. It was a shocker, an absolute shocker. There was just so many different ways that the call would have went in Ulster's favour, because it looked like it could have been a deliberate knock on from the Stormers defender. But yeah, like, it was an inexperienced Italian referee, and I mean, from the outside looking in, it just looked like there was a lot of pressure kind of put on him to change his mind. And I don't know if, like I said, you had the head of referees coming out saying it was the wrong decision. So it wasn't a great look for the league.
Okay, fair enough. Enjoy Toulouse.
I will, hopefully, if I get there, if the airport is okay.
Well, listen, either way, your Twitter feed on Friday morning of the Q will be worth a look.
Tune in.
Yeah, Cian Tracey of the Irish Independent with us.
Monday Night Rugby on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, main sponsor of the Irish rugby team. We all belong to the team of us. Splunk, News Talk.
An Splunkus Denny, Darok Mahur Chorsi Sport, Dirin ní Lachgain an Amnuchan ha Faitike, agus Cora Untach le Groinier on Journal.ie Chorsi Snookrain.
Splunk, le Cuan o Flaharta.
Each agus subscribe leis an Budfrel Anish, App News Talk, Curly Kayla, Go Loud.